The globalists have launched a war against humanity and civilization. Their goal is complete destruction of nations and the creation of a global unitary technological government. In this pursuit, having no democratic authority, they use their obscene fortunes to dominate finance, politics, health, media, and every aspect of our lives. Many people and websites are giving excellent coverage of ongoing events and revelations. Many brave people are speaking out in great personal risk. All these are directed towards the Great Awakening, but awakening is not enough. The globalists don't fear it. No one elsewhere is setting out a roadmap for defeating the globalists before they eat us up. The globalists have a plan. Patriots need a plan. This is the purpose of Nations Over Globalism, to show how patriots can defeat practically the New World Order. We need a new constitution for each nation where the globalists and their corrupt helpers cannot operate. We need a peaceful revolution in every nation. Nothing short of this will do. Nations Over Globalism can be seen as a political party in the making, so it has an all-inclusive program and an all-inclusive analysis. We need to rebuild our nations from top to bottom to banish the globalists. The globalists are parasites, nothing more. Nations Over Globalism covers all bases: constitution, civilization, economics, political philosophy, sovereign nationhood, globalist parasites, politics, history, welfare services, political science. It has to be comprehensive. All will come together to form a unified political program and a theory of government and nations. The patriotic fight to overcome the globalist parasites must occur within each nation, for it is the nation that will defeat them. But nevertheless, it is a global battle because every nation is facing the same onslaught from the globalists and their hired traitors. The democratic machinery is damaged, but not broken. We must contest elections to raise our profile as a political force in pursuit of our goal. The mainstream media can ignore street demonstrations. They cannot ignore parliamentary success. I will expand Nations Over Globalism's internet presence and hold online conferences and webinars. I want to hear your point of view. We need an international movement of separate sovereign nations acting independently. In addition to these recorded videos, I will be doing live broadcasts. So stay in touch by signing up for the Nations Over Globalism newspaper at the website www.nationsoverglobalism.uk. I am Peter Keller, writer, presenter, and creator of Nations Over Globalism, coming to you from Toulouse in southern France. If you are a patriot, I need your support. The intellectual and cultural world of our times is tired, to put the matter gently. No sensitive person could be unaware of this pervasive fatigue. Following some magnificent human achievements of the last millennia, we are now seen to be spent. But at this moment in history, we cannot afford to indulge in this malaise, for humanity is threatened by the darkest, mightiest forces that history has ever witnessed. Here, I will start by reflecting a little more deeply on the inadequacy of our culture to put itself to rights, leave alone, confront the evil forces at play. Then I will look to one of the great moments of human history, broadly what we call the Enlightenment, and show how we can draw anew from this experience. Of course, the Enlightenment is controversial in many quarters. It is also ill-defined for the most part, and it is from this that the Enlightenment as a concept suffers. This confusion I will seek to correct, and so reveal the Enlightenment as absolutely fundamental to the realization of humanity and human values. We need this inspiration of the Enlightenment now as never before. But we need to reevaluate and reform our ideas of what the Enlightenment is, all the time drawing on the genius of the true Enlightenment of old. Most of the theoretical work we have at present in the field of economics, political philosophy, philosophy of life, and the theory of constitutions and law or jurisprudence is either inadequate and in need of extension, or needs to be jettisoned entirely, only having interest for its historical significance. I say most because there are certain solid achievements that we will refer to and build on. It is likely that most of these will be unfamiliar, as they have been buried between much fallacious and disingenuous writings by those who serve the direction that our unseen controllers wish to pursue. This is not to say that people do not sincerely believe them, but as I said earlier, sincerity is not enough. However sincere you may be, if you ingest poison, you will become sick. And you will spread this sickness to all around you, and society will become fatally degraded. In what follows, be prepared for some household names to be taken down. We will arrive at many definite conclusions along the way that will then form pieces of the puzzle, or to mix metaphors, will make up the bricks from which our whole model of the world we live in and the problems we face can be built. For this, we will need new theories to provide new and more exact insights into the situation we face. This means a new theory of economics, a new political philosophy, a new philosophy of life, and a new theory of constitutions and law. All of these must be underpinned by a strong ethical sense. I discuss in other videos the state of the world today and how the globalist parasites exercise immense control on we the people and our nation through their deep world government. But here I want to look forward to the world that awaits us once we find the strength and the means to put it in place. Elsewhere I discuss the nation and explain why the nation, wherever you abide, is the route whereby we can throw off the shackles of the globalist parasites and their phony international organizations. But as I emphasize in speaking of the nation does not stand entirely alone, spiritually and culturally. The nation is part of civilization. Civilizations are not legalistic constructs, and nor do they have anything resembling a government or a bureaucracy. They result simply and only from the overriding sense of humanity that all humans of goodwill share. They are based on nothing more and nothing less. I discuss elsewhere this great subject of civilization, and here I will speak to what I call the New Enlightenment. But first, let us look at what is wrong with what stands for civilization at this moment. We are dominated in our culture by theories and principles that are completely wrong-headed and do immense harm to our civilization. They certainly comprise an important part of the problems we face. Familiar names that fall into this category are Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill, Charles Darwin, Sigmund Freud, and Le Corbusier, the architect and theorist of modernist architecture. But these are just the giants. There are many others in the ranks that contribute to the intellectual and artistic poverty of our times. We must understand exactly why these need to be taken down and replaced. If there is one characteristic that all these figures share, it is that their ideas are anti-human. All seek to characterize society and human beings from an over-rationalized, positivist point of view, that leaves no room for individuality or spiritual outlook on life. Few people today would contest the view that our society is becoming more functional and degrading to humans. There are, to be sure, still high points, and talented men and women producing great contributions that will endure. But the overall thrust that we witness everywhere is in the downward direction. At the turn of the 19th century, prominent writers such as Max Nodal in Degeneration and Gustave Le Bon in The Crowd warned us of the oncoming decadence that we face. These figures enjoyed considerable vogue at the time, but with the onset of the 20th century, were held up to ridicule for the supposedly narrow, reactionary moral ideas. Today, we could well record their warnings and read their books, written in the quaint but eloquent style of their day. The truth of their predictions, nevertheless, resonates today. All this is by way of saying that we do not now live in an age of enlightenment. Where today can we find the great lamps of creativity, intellect, spontaneity, and inspiration that might represent a society advancing into the future, sure of itself and happy in its demeanor? One could cite the immense technological achievements of the 20th century that are still in the 21st century ongoing and attaining even greater heights. Many of these, too numerous to mention, are often regarded as retrograde and damaging, but others are indisputably of benefit to mankind. But what they all have in common is that they have nothing to contribute to the moral and intellectual health of the people. Their goals are singular, narrow, and materialistic. Technology is about machines, and in spite of what is argued by some, especially the servants of deep world government, of the globalist parasites, humans are not machines and never will be, and will never in their essence have any mechanistic or digitalized component. As regards the elite arts, the assessment in most fields is almost wholly negative. These have fallen under the sway of anti-humanism as a cheap rhetoric. Few people can be bothered with currently produced modern classical music. High literature may exist here and there, but its durability has not been tested, and its promise is in doubt. Philosophy now serves only academic philosophers who discuss and compliment each other on the latest nuance of abstraction regarding a pointlessly remote question that in any case is unanswerable. The public intellectual is all but a thing of the past. In my own field of architecture, the results produced by an elite-minded profession are horrible. I refer to modernist architecture and planning. Worse, their efforts are spread across towns and cities throughout the globe, fatally disfiguring the environment and bringing us down emotionally so that we have to fight against this internally to maintain our courage and morale. I believe it is not just an unfortunate mismatch between makers and public, but part of a deliberate plan to bludgeon our sensibilities into submission and numbness. The parade of ugliness serves the purposes of the global elite to maintain their control through dehumanization and stamping out any real civilization. This is the character that has determined the thrust of many elite artistic fields in the 20th century following the First World War. There are exceptions, and these lie in the fields of art as painting or sculpture, which achieved a high degree of excellence and genuine originality early to mid-century, and jazz music, which can mostly be considered an elite art. As well as some of the technological and scientific innovations of the 20th century, we should give due prominence to popular culture. The popular music and cinema of the 20th century, riding on the back of the new technologies of the phonograph and moving pictures, often attained durability and greatness, where the elite arts failed so miserably. I was brought up in the 20th century, and I can imagine how dull and sad the world would have been without this popular culture. A lot of it was rubbish, or only ephemerally entertaining, but the best of it stays with you and stays vigorously in the public realm, and always will. The best artists carried something beyond entertainment into our lives and acquired iconic status. Today, the popular arts are still capable of great things, and above all, they know how to blamelessly entertain us and occasionally uplift us. Bravo to pop culture. The medium serving popular culture that has let us down badly is television. Predictably, human creativity has ensured that there were high spots, but overall, there is a preponderance of mindless dross. The formula uniquely suited to television is a reality show. The reality show must be a strong competitor to computer games in the drive to dumb down the people, and entering as it does into the heart of our homes operates as a powerful persuader. Television news is now official propaganda and lies, and is best avoided. The central theme of nations over globalism is that the attempted imposition by the globalists of a new world order that we are now so openly and directly experiencing, and that threatens our lives as we know them, must be combated if we are to have any kind of civilization in the future. The new world order, as I have suggested, has no human values in its agenda, not as a basis, not as a conciliatory add-on. It simply does not recognize humanity in its plans. Its creators have drifted so far from the original human identity that they were born with that they cannot conceive of a human content in their plans and would never understand even what that means. The nature of this isolation from the rest of humanity and how it arose will be important to future videos. The people in general, if they can be released from the soporific state they have slid into due to endless propaganda by the servants of the deep world government, need to find a way to challenge and defeat it. Accommodation is not a word I will use. It is not an option. If we want to preserve our humanity, their overwhelming character is as parasites. They have nothing good to offer. They only subtract from the quality of life and civilization. They suck our blood. The separation they have achieved from the rest of humankind is a due above all to great wars of parasitically accumulating money and the power that goes with it. The nature of the economic and social structure of contemporary society has meant that the sheer quantity of money they have been able to accumulate is beyond imagination. Thus endowed, they don't feel privileged, but rather blessed. Surely, they must think, they are special individuals that have been selected for the role of masters of the universe, and on the right to rule the world has been conferred on them by superior force. Matters are now being brought to a head as the New World Order has raised its head above the parapet. Starting in March 2020, the attack being rolled out across nations comes from direct orders from the New World Order elites. This is the first time the New World Order has come out into the open and declared all-out war on what it sees as its natural foe, the human population of the world. It is not that it has not wreaked comparable suffering on humanity in the past, as we shall see later, but until now, it has remained largely hidden, and only those who took the trouble to research the matter were aware of its existence. There have always been plenty of visible signs of its presence, but it required putting the pieces of the puzzle together to identify the underlying cause of it. So in this way, we have reached a junction. Either the globalist parasites will carry through their plan for impoverishment, enslavement, and destruction of our way of life, or humanity will find a way to rise up and combat it. This is one of those exceptional moments in human history where the outcome of the conflict will determine the state of the world for 1,000 years. So we, who believe in humanity, must not fail. The course of the future is thrust on our shoulders to determine. But it is not enough to say, stand up and fight. We need direction. We need a plan, just as they have a plan. But we need more than just a rigid plan or program. At the present moment, we are not short of analyses of our plight on the internet and in books. Much of it from alternative viewpoints is excellent and indispensable, but this does not provide us with a response except for more hopeful representation. And street protest, which although inspiring and important, does not actually provide a means of bringing them down. Nor is such a means easily found. New political parties in the nations of the world may be necessary as a means in themselves, but they can only work within the narrow channels provided by electoral systems. Plans for constitutional changes of a major nature to make the emergence of these powerful parasites possible are also a requirement. And economic reforms are vital to ensure a fair society and one in which a vigorous entrepreneurial dynamism can develop. Fundamental and necessary as all these may be to the making of civilization, free of the evil of the New World Order in all its forms and guises, we cannot accurately formulate them unless we see the big picture and have a vision of the society we want to have and how to make it. This society will not be strange or new. In many ways, it will be familiar, for it will and must conform to the values that real human beings, that is you and me, have always shared. Some of us today have been lucky enough to have lived through a few decades when society felt good and positive. Even if it's not perfect, it seemed to contain the possibility within it for improvement and advance. But it is now clear that there were underlying sinister forces at work. Below our clear, bright world, the dark underworld lurked. We now know we did not have the benefits we enjoyed as a guaranteed right, as we naively assumed, but we had them because those who secretly controlled us for their own reasons tolerated our seemingly benign existence. The signs were there, but we underestimated their importance. The good life was as fragile as a butterfly's wing, beautiful in its finest manifestations, but ephemeral and insecure. So the question we now face in going forward is how we will construct this grander vision that will characterize and embody the best of human aspiration and character, enable us to not just be happy or satisfied, but above all to regain our humanity with all the infinite possibilities that go with them. Well, we have seen periods in history when the human spirit appeared to stand at its finest, when creativity in every department thrived as never before, and where the goal involved all humanity, not just the narrow elite. Ultimately, these periods may not have themselves endured. Time always marches on, but there are definite reasons why they capitulated to circumstances, and these we will be exploring. Nevertheless, they stand as beacons of hope and aspiration, and still provide us with ideals that we can see are worth striving for. Indeed, we must strive for them if we want our children and their children to have lives they, as humans, deserve and were meant to know. Such periods we know about in antiquity, and the Greeks, who provided so much enduring bedrock for future society, must stand out, although we must not let their achievement crowd out other claimants of old for a place in our pantheon of inspirational cultures. The Romans are already well recognized for their indispensability to subsequent culture right across from the New World to the Old, and the great civilizations of Asia, who have their own parallel story, are also indispensable to the whole human story. Our modern sense of history places the period of European Renaissance and the European and American Enlightenments as outstanding in contributing to human understanding and development across all fields, from science to art to the humanities to politics. I say European and American Enlightenments, for the Enlightenment was not a purely French affair of the 18th century, which others followed, as is often depicted. The Enlightenment extended across Northern Europe, from the Atlantic to Russia, and the United States contributed its own original enlightenment when it bravely created a large new federal republic, something that had never been done before and that many at the time said was impossible. We should be wary of delimiting the so-called Enlightenment in time as well as space. Too often the phrase 18th century is attached to the word Enlightenment, making that century not just a necessary condition for inclusion, but a sufficient one. As a result, some figures are normally included in Enlightenment when they have no place in it. The Scottish economist and moralist Adam Smith being an outstanding example. Others are excluded when they are essential to any overall understanding of the Enlightenment. The 17th century English political philosopher John Locke falling into this category. We should seek to correct a similar error in defining the scope and encompassing epoch of the Renaissance. In a sense, the Renaissance never finished, but merged into the Enlightenment that followed it. And there are plenty of important figures whose lives and work lie on the cusp between the two. Notably, I would cite the political philosophers Grotius, Pufendorf, and the philosophers of science Francis Bacon, not to mention the colossus of Sir Isaac Newton, who somehow never normally quite makes it into the Enlightenment. The long list of major figures who often drop out of either Renaissance or Enlightenment suggests that these very concepts may lack legitimacy. But I don't think they do, for the very ideas of Renaissance Enlightenment form an indispensable mapping of the landscape of history, and their names fully express the positive values we associate with them. Of course, many today, particularly on the liberal or woke side of the political spectrum, seek to devalue or even invalidate completely the concept of the Enlightenment. But this is always a result of a fallacious interpretation of history and human thought. If we are proposing a new Enlightenment as a necessary to the defeat of the New World Order, as I believe we must, we need to have a reasonably clear idea of what we mean by new Enlightenment. For this, first, we must clarify our notions of the Enlightenment of old. From what has already been said, it is established that I want to move away from the idea of an Enlightenment represented by a handful of so-called philosophes in 18th century France. That particular phenomenon will not be the subject of our renewal, although it will undoubtedly be a component. That as a basis would be too narrow, and I would argue historically inaccurate. I want to picture an enlightenment that runs right through human history, but has by turns manifested itself more or less clearly. I have referred to the Greek and Roman antiquity and the various European renaissances as representing moments of high achievement in forming genuine human civilization. However, the last thing I would wish to do is to overemphasize their positions in this regard. We should not see them as large, secure stepping stones in time and space that leave us having to bridge a void separating them. Between these conspicuous rocks of civilized value were many well-developed centers of cultural exceptionalism, even if they do not figure so often in the history books. More significantly than all of these were those powerful threads of belief running between the fixed cities and countries that were equally important in the civilized high spots. Above all, in European terms, this means Christianity. And when I say Europe, I mean Europe from the Atlantic seaboard to the Urals, what we once referred to as Christendom. I would argue that the Christian message deserves to be considered as enlightenment as much as any enlightened culture of the modern age. This being so, how do we define enlightenment? What exactly are we talking about when we refer to an or the Enlightenment? The Enlightenment has four aspects, and these I will now describe. Firstly, Enlightenment thought places humans or humanity at the center of everything. Now, straight away, this statement will bring howls of disdain from the vast swathes of current opinion. Wokists will be in uproar. How could we be so arrogant as to put humankind before the rest of the world, with all its non-human inhabitants and its grand natural phenomena? Is this not what's so wrong with the world today, that we forget the planet with all its fauna and flora in favor of a selfish regard for our own kind, that we exploit natural resources to the detriment of all? The New World Order Agenda 21 would make the same case. It describes a use of world resources that definitely allots humankind a secondary, even tertiary position. Although supporters of this view may not realize it, this is making the planet a kind of god to which we as humans must subjugate ourselves. There are plenty of cultures in the past and maybe present that have identified this same hierarchy. Planet Earth worship is a common phenomenon in human history, as it is the sacrifice that goes with it. This last element is very much part of its contemporary manifestation in modern form. We all have to pay extra taxes, restrict every kind of energy consumption, and deny the cheap energy available to us to appease planet Earth, which we are supposed to be putting in danger. Humans are undoubtedly causing unnecessary destruction and havoc in the world they have inherited, but we have to be circumspect in assigning blame. I would argue that it's the New World Order and much that flows from it that is causing the damage, not the general population that lives on planet Earth. Beyond these material considerations, the prioritizing of human and humanity in our worldview contains within it a deep spiritual message and point of faith that I hold to. Humans are not here by accident, as the prevailing creation story represented by Darwinism would have it. Humans have a central, necessary, and inevitable place in the world order. The full philosophy, I will expound elsewhere, gives substance to the point of view and faith, and gives an account of exactly how humans inevitably occupy this central place. Even more boldly, I show how humankind is the inevitable summit of the evolutionary process we see all around us. That is not to say that humankind will not evolve further, but it does mean that it will evolve as humankind, not as some new, unimagined species. That is more the stuff of the New World Order, which imagines humans taking on the aspect of technology, usually referred to as transhumanism. This is rank nonsense, and attempts to further such a process will lead to bastard creations that assault any sense of real humanity. Real, naturally directed evolution, if it occurs, will occur within the confines of humankind. The second fundamental principle that belongs to Enlightenment thinking is that our basis of inquiry into the nature of the world in all its aspects must be founded on rationality. This has created as many problems amongst many people as the prioritization of humanity. All these problems derive from a misunderstanding of what is meant by rationality, what true rationality is. Rationality, certainly as it is understood in the Enlightenment thinking, is much broader than is commonly imagined. It does not just imply a tight logical discipline that thrusts the world as we experience it into narrow categories, all related within a fixed framework. It may indeed include that, but that is not what rationality in its total sense should mean. The confusion and negative appraisal of rationality and the Enlightenment thinking it is associated with arises because people equate rationality with positivism, and this mistake gives rise to a woefully misguided view of the history of human thought. It means, for instance, that many people view the Enlightenment in a bad light, and it means that thinkers that have nothing to do with the Enlightenment are wrongly included in it, so distorting fundamentally the understanding of what Enlightenment is really about. So what is positivism? If the following account of positivism seems rather negative, this is because it has been allowed to invade areas where it has no place. But positivism properly applied in the fields in which it is not just suited, but necessary, is part of the essential intellectual apparatus we need to understand the world and act within it. Positivism stands for being able to establish positively and without error or distortion truths about the world. This runs through all Enlightenment thought of any era, but it was most articulately represented in the 18th century, when men and women in general, not just a few intellectual elite, were visibly and consciously emerging from the grip of religious dogma. This was the start of the dominance of rationality as being the central reference for describing the reality we live in and know. This, of course, continues today, and it is safe to say it will never cease. As we shall see, this does not mean that rationality has replaced religion. It does not work like that, but commonly that is what people think. And it is not a matter of religion adapting and accommodating science and rationality, for that would devalue religion, undermine the former's importance and undermine its nature. The two coexist in a way that people experience but do not understand. Mine is an account of how this truly occurs, and I believe it has great value in that it clears a lot of air. However, we have to wait a long way to travel before we can broach them. So although 18th century thinkers were correct in distinguishing rationality from religion, they were incorrect in thinking that the former would replace the latter, insofar as they did hold to that. That this was a vain hope is clear to we who now have the advantage of first-hand observations in the 21st century, where religion is robustly alive and probably extending its grip on people. There are two ways of looking at positivism, and although they may at the first appear different, they are in fact two sides of the same coin and integrally related. The first method, which is broadly scientific, is to formulate a theory in abstract terms and then test it against the real world to verify or not. This is the empirical method. Newton was the great original master, and in his scientific theories, they stand as a monument to its success. Before him, Francis Bacon had described what he saw as empirical method, but he got things backwards. He said the science looks at the world and derives a theory from it. Common sense tells you that this is impossible. You have to use your imagination to come up with a theory, albeit one that is informed by your empirical observations, and then you test it to destruction if necessary. Nature does not deliver the theory to you on a plate. If an abstract theory, when applied to the real world, consistently avoids inconsistency or rejection, then it can be said to be positivistically established, at least for the present. It is taken as true. If we find just a single case where it fails, then the whole theory fails, and we must start again. A theory may stand its ground for many years or centuries, but eventually get found out. This usually happens through the technological development of the means of observation and measurement, such as, for instance, more powerful microscopes or more exact, more detailed methods of measurement. Newton's laws of motion had to be replaced by Einstein's relativity when more accurate means of measuring velocity and mass were developed. Newton was not thrown out, but his laws were only applied at a certain level of approximation, which, it happens, is for most general purposes, is quite adequate. But the problem arises. So the first sense of positivism gives us abstract theories which we can confidently assert are positively true or object the character of the second sense refers to facts about the world that equally set of ideas when it is anything but the earth is round and it may be rational to be positive, but it's also entirely rational to use our intuition in order to understand the world. Indeed, we must, for positivism on its own is a dangerously oversimplified model. To cite just one massively important case, Darwinism attempts to use positivism to understand the unimaginably intricate, complex processes of the evolution of life on Earth. The result is a travesty. But in our age, Darwinism has become the orthodoxy and approaches being a religion. Certainly, it challenges directly some religious beliefs. More catastrophically than that, it depicts a world empty of any sense of morality or love for the central activity that all life engages in, including that of humans, boils down to one thing: simple survival. From this simplistic notion, Darwinism makes very large claims about how it has explained how the world works, but it is a foolish fallacy. If people would only employ in respect of evolution that other side of rationality, which I have just mentioned, intuition, their intuition would tell them immediately that Darwinism cannot be true. This does not mean that creationism, to which Darwinism is usually opposed, is true, by the way, but we don't have to know what is the truth in order to see that any claim we are presented with are untrue. Unfortunately, in the world we know, we are surrounded by scientific fakery, and it determines much of people's general worldview with disastrous consequences. What I wish to emphasize for the present is simply that true rationality uses intuition as well as positivism. Due to our modern upbringing, we tend to see intuition as a useful add-on to positivism in our ability to understand the world. Intuition, however, is absolutely fundamental to our existence. All highly developed life on Earth has intuition, but in humans, it has developed into a massive, all-embracing faculty. If positivists say it is insecure and cannot be trusted, this is because they have never learned how to use it. The third fundamental aspect of Enlightenment is progress. And here again, we find ourselves immediately being put on the defensive. Progress, for some, has become a dirty word. This is indeed understandable, as there are many adverse results from, for instance, technological change that appear more negative than positive. Progress, it is argued, has got out of hand. It was running away from its original aim, which was to benefit mankind, and it is doing the opposite. Not only that, technology is despoiling the planet, creating environments that humans reject and that animals and plants cannot survive in. More radically, it is highly doubtful that spiritually, culturally, and in the humanities, we have achieved real progress in, say, the last 50 years. High sports there certainly are, but the overall assessment, many would see, is negative. And we have the looming attack by the New World Order that looks like it will return us to slavery and feudalism with all their consequences, some of which I've already referred to. But behind this awareness, we all value progress in many ways and cannot ignore the benefits it has indeed wrought. Progress, or the lack of it, can be looked at in different ways. But what concerns us here is what the Enlightenment means by progress. It is for progress, but in what sense is it for progress? The Enlightenment tells us that real progress of civilization is possible. It is above all optimistic and life-affirming, and so contrary to resignation and doom and gloom. Through optimism and life affirmation, we realize an essential aspect of our humanity, and belief in progress in this world is part of this. To depend on the afterlife to compensate us for the suffering we have seen and endured in this life, as religion sometimes insists on, is not the way of the Enlightenment. The world here and now that we inhabit is the object of our ambitions and hopes. What masquerades as progress may disappoint us, but that is no reason to abandon the belief in progress in general as a human aspiration, and that we are capable of affecting the kind of progress and change we desire. The reason why progress over the last 200 years or so appears such a mixed bag of benefit and backsliding is because progress or change has been uneven in different aspects of civilization. On top of that, the last century killed more people through war than any before, and indeed no other came even close. Exceptional and unprecedented progress in technology and science has not been matched by progress in the more spiritual and ethical sides of life. Overall, politics may have advanced prosperity, and there are giant caveats to that, none being greater than the emergence of decadence and moral decline. Quite simply, the world we have created is out of balance. The new Enlightenment must address this and seek to correct it. In this task, there is a monster problem to overcome that does not figure in most assessments of what is wrong. This is parasitism. I will not expand on this subject here, but it will be of a fundamental to our understanding of the true nature of the New World Order. They are parasites and nothing else, and we need to understand how and why. Like all parasites, they can be removed with no detriment to the rest of the body of humankind, but to unimaginable benefit. If we did not believe in progress, there would be no point in following the direction of these anti-globalist videos, which is to show how we can create civilization anew based on the civilization we know. The New World Order can have no place in an enlightened civilization. Any enlightened people from the past would recognize the view of enlightenment they shared with each other and share with us. But it cannot be overemphasized that we need to build on previous achievements to make the new enlightenment more robust and to more truthfully address reality. If the old enlightenment seemed to have failed, then it did so because it did not protect us from evil enhancing itself and enriching itself to construct the enemy of the New World Order that we now face. Make no mistake, the New World Order would destroy civilization, and it has not been shy of advertising this fact. The fourth aspect of enlightenment brings it close to uniquely 20th, 21st century attitudes, and this is inclusiveness. The belief that whatever beneficial idea we propose must benefit everybody, not just an elite. Everyone will share in the Enlightenment. It is here that the notion of the Enlightenment being above all of the 20th century makes most sense. Before the 18th century, the secular view of society assigned each person a rank in society which they could not expect to migrate from except under exceptional or lucky circumstances. Class was built into the identity of each individual. The doing away with class was hardly changed in the 18th century, but the idea of equality, whatever that is taken to be, certainly was. One of the very highest achievements of the 18th century Enlightenment was the United States Constitution and the belief in the absolute equality between individuals in rights, laws, and standing is firmly built into the US Constitution with a clarity that had never been seen before. That Constitution and the many others that followed it, that were modeled on it, now has proved wanting, for the Constitution should protect us from overbearing power in a minority elite. This is exactly what we are seeing now, and it's become explicit all over the world. It is not so much that this form of constitution is wrong, but that it is not enough. Mainly, it does not address a fundamental feature of all human societies, and this is the emergence of powerful parasites, as I have already referred to. That, as we shall see, is not the only problem with current constitutions, but the point I wish to emphasize now is that constitutions need radical extension, not radical overhaul of the principles that they already contain. I deliberately use the word inclusiveness and steer away from equality. Equality as a principle means nothing without a lot of qualification, and we do not need to explore that here. Whatever it is, we certainly do not have it in our present time, and we certainly do not have universal inclusiveness in any sense that that idea can be envisaged. The elite govern us and decide what we think. The wealth of the nation is either stolen or massively unevenly distributed. What we see everywhere today is exclusion, not inclusion. So to sum up, these are the four essential elements that make up enlightenment. 1, human centrality. 2, rationality. 3, progress. 4, inclusiveness. When we talk about a new enlightenment for the 20th century, we mean these four principles must be included. They must be part of our goal and our methods. These four come together to embody a single idea that it is old as human history, and this is world and life affirmation, or to put it more succinctly, optimism. Optimism is human, and pessimism and negation of life counter the human spirit. All four essential elements have almost all completely dropped out of the mainstream dialogue. Human centrality has been replaced by Mother Earth centrality. Rationality has been replaced by scientism. Progress has been hijacked to mean pure technological progress in science and puerile notions of avant-gardism in the elite arts. Inclusiveness no longer forms part of the political vocabulary unless employed as a lie and a sop. The centrality of these ideas to our new enlightenment fully justifies our abrogation of the name. We will expand and develop the new enlightenment beyond the previous periods of the enlightenment. Society and civilization is now so far off track that we clearly need some fresh thinking about what we mean by enlightenment. In spite of inclusiveness being an essentially modern idea, recall what I said about the need to trace what we refer to as enlightenment throughout our long history. The four ideas fundamental to enlightenment, human centrality, rationality, progress, and inclusiveness, can all be traced back to the beginnings of human history and civilization. This is not to say that they always exist everywhere, far from it, but the point is these ideas have rarely been totally foreign to human development. I also spoke about continuous threads that wind themselves through human history that also bear a strong enlightened aspect. Even if they do not embody all the four fundamental ideas, prime amongst these must be Christianity. Christianity practically invented the concept of human centrality, and no other religion has ever done this, and this is no doubt a great part of its appeal. No philosophy has ever done this either, although it is fundamentally to the philosophy I wish to put forward. The gods of all other religions are remote and do not declare openly their commitment to humans. The only possible exception to this is Judaism, but it is compromised on this point by God limiting its blessings to Jews, and even then, the Old Testament stories, which are taken from the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, tell of a fractious relationship between God and the Jews. Only with Christianity does God promote humans, all humans, to a special place in his affections, and this is proven by the sacrifice of his own son in the service of humanity. Inclusiveness is one of the bedrocks of Christianity, for it teaches us that God loves all his children without exception, and inclusion in the religion is just a matter of declaring faith in it. Christianity holds out no punishment for apostates, but simply waits for them to return to the fold, where they are welcomed with open arms. The belief in progress, that is the ability of humans to improve the lot of humankind, is intrinsic with the original message of Jesus. Otherwise, why would he have come down to earth? Rationality was what the early debates that created and perfected the Christian theology used to arrive at a conclusion. The point is they did not rely on revelation, but argument. So even if rationality is not the prime message of Christianity, the religion is certainly not anti-rational. Christianity's rational side undoubtedly was derived from Plato. This makes Christianity an optimistic, life-affirming religion, as it is told in the Bible. Later theologians, notably St. Augustine, introduced a pessimistic, life-denying message, and the Catholic Church chose to run with St. Augustine against the Bible. The post-Reformation churches of Western Europe followed with pessimism, emphasizing human original sin and even predestination. But they did free believers from the corrupt Catholic Church organization and recognized individual responsibility and will. In this, they were liberated and also propelled the new idea of a constantly advancing science. They prepared the way for a return to Enlightenment thinking. So can we justifiably include Christianity in Enlightenment thinking? I prefer to apply a looser term to it, and this is enlightened humanism, meaning quite simply that it sheds optimistic light on the human condition. In this video, I have indicated a direction of thinking to embark on. The New World Order that controls us through the governments of almost every advanced nation is evil, and it will consume us entirely and destroy civilization if we let it. These are its declared aims, and it came out into the open in 2020 and is rapidly advancing its goals more rapidly than anyone could have imagined. We counter this with our nation's over-globalism movement. But in order to bolster this, we need to look to human history and draw strength from enlightened humanism, as it has been manifested down the centuries. But more than that, we need to build on this to create a new enlightenment that will improve on the originals. That they have been found wanton is proven by the state of the world today. It is clear that previous realizations of the Enlightenment ideas have not been successful enough to protect us against overbearing evil. This new enlightenment is part of the process of defeating globalists and their new world order and everything that goes with it.